money that was stolen during the governments of Fernando Enrique Cardoso, it could have been possible to have invested in a huge infrastructure program. With that program, unemployment could have been abolished definitely in Brazil. Education and healthcare investment could have been tripled, and minimum wages could have been at least increased in 5 times. You have the right to know the truth. Only the illicit fees generated by having given away half of Brazil for nothing were $179 billion at that time, or the equivalent of $281 billion in current value. The list of more than 1,500 receipts related to transfer from Banco Banestado Bank of Paraná, to the New York branch, revealed by Duplo Expresso portal, shockingly exposed the details of the largest corruption case in Brazil, one of the largest ones in the world, after 20 years. The information presented was validated by some of the main actors who participated in investigations, such as the then federal police delegate in charge of the case, Dr. Antonio Castillo, the federal supervisor in charge of the case, Dr. Celso Tres, and the former governor of the state of Paraná, Roberto Requião. These receipts contain the specific names and amounts involved through the so-called CC5 accounts, the accounts that allowed transactions to and from abroad. As Roberto Requião said, most remittances were made using data from poor people who were used as part of the fraud. In order to discover the identities of those who use poor people and who get to know about the money laundering closed circuit, the so-called Banestado VIP list would still be necessary. That brings the third layer of Banestado accounts from abroad, indicating the destination and the beneficiary end of remittances and return to Brazil on the money already laundered. The VIP list was prepared in 2003 by New York district attorneys. The Brazilian responsible prosecutors keep deep silence, and among them are important Lava Jato car wash characters, such as Carlos Fernando dos Santos Lima and Vladimir Aras. Antero Paes de Barros of PSDB, Fernando Enrique Cardoso's political party, Rodrigo Maia, current president of the Chamber of Deputies, Bolsonarist Magno Malta of Liberal Party, Dr. Helio of PDT, José Mentor of PT, the Labour Party, Lula's party, and recently and conveniently passed away. José Mentor was an affiliate of ex-Super PT governing minister José Dirceu. The full circle of dollar dealers, evasion and money laundering on their return to Brazil was only revealed about former mayor of São Paulo City, Paulo Salim Maluf and Senator José Serra, when there were no more usage for capitalist vultures. Both of them were raided out. Paulo Maluf bribes were received for overbilling the construction works of Aguas Espraiadas Avenue and Ayrton Senna Tunnel in the city of São Paulo. That money was transferred to New York through the Banestado CC5 accounts. From there on, the funds were transferred to Jersey Islands. The money was used to buy debentures issued by Eucatex, the main company of Maluf's family. About José Serra, the circuit was described in great details in the famous book The Privateering of Tucanos, the PSDB privatization. On the 140 pages of photocopied documents, the book of the well-known journalist Amaury Ribeiro Jr. explained the corruption money transit from Caribbean fiscal paradises that was mainly operated through Verónica Serra's company. She is the daughter of José Serra. The money came back to Brazil after laundering, with the complicity of the big international banks and the United States Treasury Department. It overcame passive corruption, the bribe received for overbilling, and the evasion of foreign money through irregular remittances using the CC5 accounts. Because of that kind of operations, Brazilian internal debt exploded.
The biggest corruption case in Brazil, the scandal of Banestado, generated the equivalent of $281 billion up to date. But the real corruption was not this case, but was the legal corruption. That was the selling of half of Brazil per its 3 to 5% of its market value and paid by public titles that didn't value, they were not worth anything anymore. And all of the elites, the dominant rules, were involved in that real corruption case. All of the big entrepreneurs, Brazilian and foreigners, all of the political parties, from the right to the left, all of the television networks and radio networks, and the famous presenters, and also high judges. Some of them, they are very active and very powerful today.
The current Minister of the Supreme Federal Court, STF, and President of Superior Electoral Court, TSE, Luis Roberto Barroso, sent via CC5 account the equivalent in carried values to about $4 million. The elections and even the impeachment of the list Bolsonaro-Mourão depends on this not very clean man. No one from the so-called left parties have even questioned such an undemocratic fact. Oh, sure, they have been too busy with the Bolsonarist elections. In the mainstream media, there were not just operations carried out by Globo Network and Marinho's family, the owners of Globo Network. They transferred to New York more than 35 billion reais, more than $6 billion. TV Globo Limited, sent the equivalent in current values to more than US dollars 500 million. Globo Cabo, almost $100 million. Global Communications, almost $4 billion. Global Participations, almost $1 billion. Global Sat, almost $250 million. RBS TV transferred the equivalent of almost $100 million. Abril Group transferred the equivalent of about $1 billion. SBT Group, owned by Silvio Santos, moved almost $8 million. Araucaria Bank, that was used by PSDB and then parties DEM, transferred more than $600 million. Safra Bank transferred the equivalent to about $35 billion. Bozano Simonsi Company, almost $1.5 billion. Odebrecht, the construction company, almost $4 billion. Gerdau Group and Gerdau family, about $1 billion. They are involved in financing extreme right-wing organizations such as Ven para Rua, Come to the Streets, and MBL. Alcoa, the American aluminum company, almost $1.5 billion. Aracruz Cellulose, more than $3 billion. Arnaldo Jabor, the Global Network famous presenter, more than $4 million. Carlos Roberto Massa, known as Ratinho, presenter of SBT Television Network, more than $70 million. And the list is huge. The entire Brazil ruling classes is involved and compromised to the United States. Giving away half of Brazil during the 1990s left Brazil so exposed that today there is the danger even of the disappearance of the Brazilian nation. With the bribes of Banestado scandal, it could have been possible to pay for the family scholarship that lifted out of poverty 16 million people for 100 years. And that represents just a sniff of what it was really stolen and given away.
In the biggest scandal of corruption in Brazil, Banestado, no one was punished. Neither in the Congress inquiry nor in the justice investigation. The chief of the justice investigation was Sergio Moro, the chief of Lava Jato car wash operation 10 years later. In next chapter, we will present with evidences and information about the justice investigation. You have to fasten your seat belts because you will have such a big disgust. You have the right to know the truth.